Formation. What is Catholicism? Part 2. The following presentation would be impossible without these resources. Let's begin. I am Catholic. Yo soy católico. We are Catholic. Somos católicos. Okay, but what does that mean? Catholicism is a reality both rich and diverse. Catholicism is a Christian tradition, a way of life, and a community. That is to say, Catholicism is comprised of faith, theologies, and doctrines, and is characterized by specific liturgical, ethical, and spiritual orientations and behaviors. But at the same time, Catholicism is a people, or rather a cluster of peoples, with a particular history. The word Catholic is derived from the Greek adjective katholikos, meaning universal, and from the Greek adverbial phrase katholou, meaning on the whole. The term Catholic was first used by Proto-Orthodox Jesus group leader Ignatius of Antioch in his letter to the Smyrnaeans. Where the episkopos, the supervisor, is to be seen, there let all his people be. Just as wherever Jesus Christ is present, we have the ecclesia, Catholic. We have the assembly, universal. Ever since the Protestant Reformation, the word Catholic has commonly been used in opposition to Protestant. But I have to ask you a question. Do you think Protestant is the proper opposite to Catholic? Do you think that Protestantism is the opposite of Catholicism? What do you think? If you think that that is true, that Protestantism is the opposite of Catholicism and Protestant is the opposite to Catholic, you're mistaken. The real opposite to Catholic is not Protestant, but sectarian, which pertains to a part of the ecclesia or church that has separated itself off from the worldwide ecclesia, the worldwide church, and to some extent has separated itself from the very world itself. Therefore, the Christian saint and doctor of the church, Augustine of Hippo, contrasted the separatist and sectarian movements of his time, especially Donatism in North Africa, with the Catholic Church that is both universal and orthodox in its faith. In his letter to a Donatist bishop, Augustine wrote, "Do you happen to know why it should be that Christ should lose his inheritance, which is spread over the whole world, and should suddenly be found surviving only in the Africans, and not in all of them? The Catholic ecclesia exists indeed in Africa, since God willed and ordained that it should exist throughout the whole world. Whereas your party, which is called the party of Donatus, does not exist in all those places in which the writings of the apostles, their discourse, and their actions have been current." Here we get to see a glimpse of the opposite of Catholic, sectarian. St. Cyril of Jerusalem was even more explicit than Augustine. The ecclesia is called Catholic because it extends through all the world. All, total, whole. Because it teaches universally and without omission all the doctrines which ought to come to human knowledge. Because it brings under the sway of true religion all classes of people, rulers and subjects, learned and ignorant, and because it universally treats and heals every type of sin, and possesses in itself every kind of virtue which can be named, and spiritual gifts of every kind. Again, whole, total, all. Catholic. The opposite of which is part, sectarian. The word Catholic was incorporated into the creeds along with the other notes of the ecclesia, later called church. 1. Holy and apostolic, like one holy Catholic and apostolic. The word Catholic appears in the Creed of Cyril of Jerusalem, the Creed of Epiphanius, and in the Nicene-Constantinopolitan Creed that is still recited in the liturgy today as our profession of faith. But the use of the word Catholic only became divisive after the East-West Schism of the 11th century and the Protestant Reformation of the 16th century. Many hundreds of years passed, and a tragic schism split Christianity east and west. The Latin-speaking West claimed for itself the title Catholic Church, with a big C or capital C Catholic, while the Greek-speaking East appropriated the name Holy Orthodox Church, with a capital O or big O Orthodox. After the ruptures of the Reformation in the 16th century, those Western communities in communion with Rome retained the adjective Big C Catholic, while the churches that broke with the papacy were called Protestant. However, some today insist that the adjective Small C Catholic applies also to many other Christians who regard themselves as evangelical, Reformed, and Big C Catholic alike. Indeed, the Second Vatican Council from 1962 to 1965 broadened the notion of Catholicity to include churches outside the Big C Catholic communion of Christian churches, often referred to just as the Catholic Church, and spoke of them as possessing varying degrees of Catholicity. Consider the image on this slide. Now, should Catholics refer to themselves as Catholic or Roman Catholic? Are Big C Catholics who are in communion with Rome and its bishop, called the Pope, Roman Catholics or just plain Catholics? Some inside as well as outside the Big C Catholic Church think it ecumenically insensitive to drop the adjective Roman because so many Anglican, Big O Orthodox, Protestant, and Oriental Christians also regard themselves as Small C Catholic. But other Big C Catholics object to the use of the adjective Roman on ecclesiological grounds, ecclesiology being the theological study of the Church. For such Big C Catholics, the adjective Roman tends to confuse rather than define the reality of Catholicism. For these Big C Catholics, the history of the Church begins with Jesus' gathering of his disciples and with the post-resurrection commissioning of Peter to be the chief shepherd and foundation of the Church. But in Jerusalem, not in Rome. Mind you, these are Big C Catholics that are in communion with the Bishop of Rome, we call the Pope. Take a look at this graphic to see a much richer understanding of Catholicism than just Roman Catholicism. Note only one of the circles is Roman. Look at all the other circles. These represent different rites. Therefore, for these people, it is not the Roman primacy that gives Catholicism one of its distinctive marks of identity within the family of Christian churches, but rather the Petrine primacy. The adjective Roman applies more properly to the diocese or see of Rome than to the worldwide church which is in union with the Bishop of Rome. Indeed, it strikes some Big C Catholics as contradictory to call the church Big C Catholic and Roman at one and the same time. For example, Eastern Rite Big C Catholics, who are in union with the Bishop of Rome, sometimes pejoratively called uniates, also find the adjective Roman objectionable. They prefer to speak of their churches as Big C Catholic, and then to distinguish particular ecclesial traditions within the Big C Catholic communion. Again, consider the graphic. In addition to the Latin or Roman tradition, there are several other non-Latin, non-Roman ecclesial traditions: Armenian, Byzantine, Coptic, Ethiopian, East Syrian or Chaldean, West Syrian, and Maronite. Each of these is a Big C Catholic Church in communion with the Bishop of Rome, but none of these is a Roman or Latin Rite Big C Catholic Church. See? Catholicism, therefore, is neither narrowly Roman nor narrowly Western. Catholicism is universal in the fullest sense of the word. In some way it is already universal, but is also becoming universal. It should be evident from the title of this formation session, "What is Catholicism?" rather than "What is Roman Catholicism?" which direction we are heading in. To choose one side, however, is not necessarily to reject the other. One can apply the term small c Catholic to the community of churches in communion with Rome, Big C Catholics, without precluding its wider application to Anglicans, Orthodox, Big O, Protestants, and Oriental Christians. At the same time, Big C Catholics can reject the adjective Roman without lapsing into ecclesiastical triumphalism. What is important is that each side explain and support the reasons for the position taken.